Oh, they're talking about you, aren't they? They're saying you've changed. They're saying you don't fit in anymore. They're whispering that you've gone too far, too intense, too obsessed, too different. They're saying you're out. Soft laugh. Out of what? Out of the little cage they built for you. Out of the script they wrote for your life. Out of the comfortable mediocrity they call normal. You see, society loves sanity, but only the kind that obeys. Only the kind that stays small. Only the kind that doesn't ask dangerous questions. The moment you start thinking differently, moving differently, refusing to clap for things that don't deserve applause, suddenly you're crazy. But here's the punchline. Every revolution looked insane at the beginning. Every visionary was called unstable. Every person who refused to bow was labeled a problem. They don't fear your madness. They fear your precision. Because this isn't emotional chaos. This isn't random rebellion. This is tactical insanity. It's the calm in your eyes when everything collapses. It's the smile when they expect you to break. It's the strategy behind your silence. They think you're spiraling, but you're calculating. They think you've lost control, but you've finally stopped pretending. And that scares them. So let them talk. Let them laugh. Let them say you're out. Because sometimes you have to step outside the system to see how broken it really is. And when you come back, you won't be asking for permission. You'll be rewriting the rules. They call you crazy the moment you stop asking for permission. The moment your dreams become louder than their comfort. The moment your standards rise higher than their expectations. Crazy is the word people use when they can't categorize you. When you don't fit inside their predictable patterns. When you refuse to live a life that feels like a quiet funeral. Think about it. The same world that rewards blind conformity punishes bold individuality. If you follow the script, you're responsible. If you question the script, you're unstable. If you work a job you hate for 40 years, you're mature. If you walk away to build something uncertain, you've lost your mind. Isn't it funny how sanity is defined by comfort? But here's the twist. Being labeled crazy is a signal. It means you're no longer digestible. You're no longer easy to predict. You've stepped outside the emotional leash society quietly ties around people's necks. And when that leash snaps, the noise begins. Laughter, criticism, concern, mockery disguised as advice. Be realistic. Calm down. Don't overthink.
Why can't you just be normal? Normal.
That beautiful prison word. Normal keeps people safe. Safe keeps people average. And average keeps people invisible. When you embrace the label of crazy, something shifts inside you. You stop defending your ambition. You stop shrinking your intensity. You stop watering down your ideas so others can swallow them without choking. You begin to understand that discomfort in others is not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign you're disruptive. And disruption is powerful. Every bold decision feels insane before it feels inevitable. Starting from zero. Speaking when you're shaking. Investing in yourself when your bank account laughs at you. Cutting off people who drain your spirit. Choosing discipline over distraction. It all looks irrational to someone who is addicted to comfort. But crazy. People build empires. They wake up before the sun, not because it's trendy, but because hunger doesn't let them sleep. They say no to parties because their goals are louder than the music. They sacrifice temporary pleasure for permanent leverage. From the outside, it looks obsessive. From the inside, it feels necessary. The truth is, most people aren't afraid you'll fail. They're afraid you won't. Because if you succeed after being called crazy, it exposes their excuses. It forces them to confront the dreams they buried. It reminds them that they chose safety over possibility. Your courage becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see in that reflection. So embrace the label. Wear it like armor. Let it remind you that growth always looks reckless to those who refuse to evolve. Stop trying to look stable in a world that rewards stagnation. Stop explaining your hunger to people who are comfortable starving spiritually. There's a difference between chaos and calculated risk, between emotional breakdown and intentional transformation, between reckless behavior and radical belief. Make sure your crazy is disciplined. Make sure your intensity has direction. Make sure your fire is controlled, not wild. Because when your so-called insanity is fueled by vision, patience, and relentless execution, it stops being madness, it becomes strategy. And one day, the same people who whispered, "You've lost it," will say, "I always knew you were different. Different, not crazy." But by then, you won't need their validation. You'll have already proven that stepping outside the definition of normal was the sanest decision you ever made. Silence is dangerous. Not the weak silence of fear, but the deliberate silence of someone who is observing, calculating, preparing. The loudest person in the room usually wants attention. The quiet one wants control. People misunderstand silence. They think if you're not arguing, you're losing. If you're not explaining, you're unsure. If you're not reacting, you're weak. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is data collection. While others are busy proving themselves, you are studying patterns. While they reveal emotions, you measure intentions. Noise exposes strategy. Silence protects it. When someone insults you and you don't respond, it confuses them. They expected resistance. They expected drama. They expected a fight they could manage. But calm observation, that's unpredictable. That's unsettling. Because when you don't react, they lose access to your emotional steering wheel. Control is not about domination. It's about emotional discipline. Most people are controlled through reaction. Say something sharp, they flare up. Push a button, they explode. Trigger fear, they retreat. But when you master silence, you remove those buttons. You become unreadable, and unreadable people are powerful. Silence builds presence. Have you ever noticed how the person who speaks the least often commands the most attention when they finally do speak? Words gain weight when they are not thrown around carelessly. Scarcity creates value. When your voice is rare, it carries gravity. There's also a deeper layer. Silence strengthens the mind. In quiet moments, you hear your real thoughts without outside interference. You sharpen clarity. You confront doubt without distraction. You refine your plan without broadcasting it to critics who would sabotage it before it matures. Announcing every move is insecurity disguised as confidence. Real strategy develops in the dark. Think about predators in the wild. They don't roar before they strike. They move quietly. They watch patiently. They wait for the exact moment when effort is minimal and impact is maximum. That's tactical silence, not passive, not timid, intentional. In arguments, silence disarms chaos. When someone tries to provoke you and you simply look at them calmly, you shift the power dynamic. Their energy rises. Yours remains steady. They become emotional. You become strategic. And emotional people make predictable mistakes. Silence also protects vision. The early stages of ambition are fragile. If you expose your plans too soon, they become vulnerable to doubt, ridicule, and negativity. Not everyone deserves access to your blueprint. Not everyone has earned the right to see your unfinished version. Some battles are won without a single word, by walking away, by refusing to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, by letting results speak when the time is right. There is strength in withholding reaction, strength in patience, strength in watching others underestimate you because they mistake quiet for weakness. And here's the irony: the world is addicted to noise. Constant opinions, Endless commentary. Everyone shouting. Few listening. So when you choose silence, you step outside the chaos. You become centered while others are scattered. Silence doesn't mean you lack thoughts. It means you have too many important ones to waste on meaningless exchanges. When you finally decide to speak, your words won't be emotional bursts. They'll be precise, calculated, intentional, and by then people will realize your quiet wasn't absence. It was preparation. Isolation feels like punishment at first. The phone stops ringing. Invitations slow down. Conversations become shorter. You start noticing how quiet everything is. And in that quiet, doubt creeps in. Did I do something wrong? Did I lose people? Am I falling behind? But isolation is not always rejection. Sometimes it's redirection. When you begin to outgrow environments, friction appears. Your mindset shifts. Your priorities change. The things that once entertained you start feeling empty. The jokes don't hit the same. The conversations feel repetitive. You're not better than anyone. You're just moving in a different direction. And movement creates distance. Most people fear being alone because they've never met themselves without distractions. Noise keeps them comfortable. Company keeps them validated. Constant connection keeps them from confronting their own thoughts. But when you step into isolation, you meet the raw version of who you are. And that meeting is uncomfortable. There's no applause in isolation, no immediate feedback, no one clapping for your discipline, no one noticing the nights you stay up building something. It's just you and your ambition staring at each other. No excuses, no audience. That's where vision sharpens. When you're alone, you can think clearly. You can analyze your weaknesses without embarrassment. You can admit your fears without judgment. You can plan without interference. Isolation removes comparison. It removes the subtle pressure to perform for others. It forces you to ask a dangerous question. What do I actually want? Not what impresses people. Not what earns quick validation. Not what looks good on social media. What do you want when nobody is watching? Isolation builds emotional endurance. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. You learn to solve problems independently. You learn that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness feels like lack. Solitude feels like power. During isolation, you discover your habits, the weak ones, the strong ones. You realize where you waste time, where you lie to yourself, where you sabotage progress. And because no one else is there to blame, accountability becomes unavoidable. That's growth. Isolation also protects transformation. When you're changing, you're fragile. Old identities are breaking apart. New ones are still forming. If you stay around people who only recognize your past version, they'll unconsciously pull you back. Not because they hate you, but because your growth challenges their comfort. Distance gives you space to evolve without resistance. In isolation, creativity expands. Ideas flow differently when there's silence. Strategy deepens. Discipline strengthens. You start building habits that don't depend on motivation or external pressure. You act because you decided to, not because someone expects you to. And here's the secret. The world often mistakes isolation for failure. They see you alone and assume you've been left behind. They don't realize you stepped away intentionally. They don't see the foundation being built underground. But foundations are always built in silence. Isolation teaches you to enjoy your own company, to trust your decisions, to validate yourself, to stop chasing approval. And once you become comfortable alone, you become unstoppable in crowds, because you no longer need them. You choose them. There's power in knowing you can walk alone and still move forward. There's strength in building quietly while others are distracted. Isolation is not the end of connection. It's the beginning of clarity. And clarity changes everything. Chaos scares people because they don't understand it. They see movement without structure, noise without order, fire without boundaries. But controlled chaos is different. It's not destruction without thought. It's disruption with direction. Most people chase stability so hard that they become fragile. They build routines so rigid that the slightest change breaks them. They depend on perfect timing, perfect conditions, perfect moods, and when life shifts, as it always does, they collapse. That's not strength. That's dependency disguised as discipline. Controlled chaos trains adaptability. When you willingly step into uncomfortable environments, when you challenge your own limits, when you introduce pressure on purpose, you create resilience. You stop waiting for life to test you. You test yourself first. There's a difference between losing control and redefining it. Losing control is emotional. It's reacting without thinking. It's letting anger, fear, or ego dictate your moves. But controlled chaos is calculated. It's stepping into uncertainty with awareness. It's shaking the table intentionally to see what falls apart and what remains solid. Sometimes you must disrupt your own comfort before the world does it for you. Change your routine before boredom rots your ambition. Increase your standards before mediocrity becomes your identity. Cut distractions before they quietly steal years from your life. On the surface, it looks extreme. People will say you're doing too much, moving too fast, pushing too hard. But they don't see the strategy. Comfort creates complacency. Complacency kills growth, and growth requires friction. When you introduce controlled chaos, you sharpen focus. You learn to make decisions under pressure. You strengthen your mental endurance. You become comfortable in environments where others panic. While they freeze, you function. That's advantage. Think about training. Muscles don't grow in comfort. They grow under tension. The stress breaks fibers down so they rebuild stronger. Your mindset works the same way. Without pressure, it remains weak. Without challenge, it remains small. Controlled chaos is intentional stress. You push your limits with discipline. You expose yourself to risk, but measured risk. You make bold moves, but informed ones. You step into rooms where you're underestimated. You take on projects that intimidate you. You aim higher than what feels safe, not recklessly, strategically. The key is emotional control. Chaos around you doesn't mean chaos within you. Your heart stays steady while your actions are bold. Your thinking remains sharp while your moves are unpredictable. That balance creates leverage. People who rely on routine struggle when variables change. But you've practiced navigating unpredictability. You've trained your mind to adapt quickly. So when real storms arrive, you're not shocked. You're prepared. Controlled chaos also reveals truth. When you disrupt comfort, you see who stands firm and who falls away. You see which habits survive pressure and which collapse. You discover your real thresholds. It's not about being reckless. It's about being anti-fragile. Instead of avoiding uncertainty, you use it. Instead of fearing change, you initiate it. Instead of waiting to react, you act first. That proactive disruption keeps you ahead. Because while others are trying to restore balance after life shakes them, you've already mastered dancing in instability. And in a world that changes constantly, the person who thrives in controlled chaos doesn't just survive, they dominate. When they say you're out, what they really mean is you no longer fit the version of you they were comfortable with. You stopped playing the role they assigned. You stopped shrinking to match their expectations. You stopped apologizing for your growth. And that shift makes people uneasy. Being out sounds like exclusion, like rejection, like loss. But sometimes being out is elevation. You're not outside because you failed. You're outside because you evolved. There's a silent contract in every social circle. Stay predictable. Stay familiar. Stay aligned with the group's comfort zone. The moment you break that contract, resistance begins. Subtle jokes, backhanded compliments, concern disguised as criticism. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. That's not you. But it is you. It's just the updated version. Growth creates distance. Not because you think you're better, but because your priorities shift. What once excited you now drains you. What once scared you now challenges you. What once satisfied you now feels small. And small no longer fits. When they say you're out, they're measuring you against the past. Against who you were when you were easier to understand. Easier to control. Easier to relate to. But progress is rarely relatable to those who choose comfort. You start waking up earlier. They call it obsession. You invest in yourself. They call it risky. You set boundaries. They call it attitude. You distance yourself from negativity. They call it ego. It's easier to label you than to question themselves. The truth is, stepping out requires courage. It means walking into uncertainty without applause. It means leaving behind validation for vision. It means accepting temporary loneliness for long-term alignment. Most people won't do that. They'd rather stay in spaces that feel familiar than risk standing alone in new territory. So when you leave the familiar behind, it threatens their stability. Your movement highlights their stillness. But being out is where perspective lies. Outside the noise, you see patterns clearly. Outside the pressure to conform, you think independently. Outside the constant opinions, your own voice grows louder. And that clarity changes how you move. You stop chasing acceptance. You start chasing alignment. You stop proving your worth. You start building it. You stop trying to fit in rooms that shrink your ambition. Because you've realized something powerful fitting in was never the goal. Expanding was. Yes, being out can feel uncomfortable. There are moments of doubt. Moments where you question if the separation was worth it. Moments where nostalgia tries to pull you back. But growth is rarely comfortable. Comfort keeps you in place. Discomfort moves you forward. And one day, the same people who said you were out will realize you weren't removed. You relocated. You didn't fall behind. You moved ahead. You didn't lose connection. You upgraded it. Because being out of their expectations puts you in alignment with your potential. And potential is a place very few people are brave enough to live in.